People like to tell children their blessings. In our house, blessings were measured in invoices and apologies. I learned very early that silence buys peace, that a well-timed smile costs less than a question, and that the smallest sound can set off a chain reaction. One slammed glass, one hissed whisper, one door closing softly like a verdict. My name is Mila Hartwell, and before I knew my multiplication tables, I knew this. Whatever had gone wrong in our family had my name on it. What sin did I commit, other than being just a little girl, all because of you? I didn't have the words then, just the bruise-colored feeling that I was an answer to a question no one would ask out loud. We lived in a cedar-sided house on Birch Lane, the kind with a porch people photograph for magazines. My father, Mr. Hartwell at his company, sir at the dinner table when he wanted to be unkind, was the kind of man other people listened to. He donated to the library and shook hands too tightly. My mother, Elena, had a way of dressing that made her look like a portrait, tasteful, framed, unmoving. I used to watch her listen to him, chin lifted, as if she'd practiced listening in a mirror. There were rules. No humming at the table. Fork tines down. No asking where Daddy went after 8. No knocking on the study door when it was shut for calls. No touching the bottom drawer of the cherry desk in the hall. No calling my mother Mama in public. Mila, you're too old for that now, just say Mom. Some rules lived on paper on the refrigerator. Most lived inside my ribs. I can tell you the first time I heard it, the sentence that would follow me like a shadow. I was 5, sitting on the top step in my socks, the wool catching on a splinter. Downstairs, voices rose like waves under the study door. My father's low and controlled, my mother's a trembling violin string. I remember the word mistake, and my father's glass clinking back onto a coaster. Then my mother, soft and breaking. If only she hadn't been born. Silence, so heavy it felt like the house was holding its breath. A beat later, a whisper I didn't yet understand from him. We agreed. We manage it. We move on. Manage what? Move on from where? I pushed my socked heel against the splinter until it stung. The sting felt simpler than the question. Growing up inside a perfect picture teaches you to read the frame. My father's laugh was always loudest at charity events. My mother's smile was always tightest after. When I turned 7, the cake had my name piped in gold cursive, and my father missed the moment the candle smoked because he was taking a call. Mom cut me a slice the size of a photograph. That night, when I tiptoed to the kitchen for water, I found her at the sink, icing smeared on a plate like a bruise. She didn't turn when she said, "Back to bed, Mila." I wanted to ask her if I'd done something wrong. I wanted to ask her if she'd always been this quiet before me. Instead, I carried the glass with both hands and walked like the floor was a lake. Teachers liked me. I said please and remembered to sharpen my pencils at home. Adults pinched my cheek in the grocery store and told my mother she was lucky to have such a well-behaved girl. Mom's fingers tightened on the card handle and she said, "We do our best." I learned to collect these sentences, to line them up in my head like beads. Mistake. Manage it. Move on, we do our best. They never matched, but they mattered. When I was 10, I asked my father what liability meant. He was tying his tie in the mirror. I stood in the doorway counting the stripes. He didn't look at me when he answered. "Something you owe," he said, tugging the knot snug. "Something that could cost you if you don't handle it properly." I didn't ask if people could be liabilities. I didn't ask why the word felt like a tag pinned under my sweater. There was a locked cabinet in the hallway, a cherry thing with a burr in the wood that snagged your sleeve if you brushed it. Dad kept the keys on a ring that never left his pocket. Once, when I was 12, the ring fell between the sofa cushions. I retrieved it for him, and the metal felt cold and important. "That," he said, taking it back, "is not a toy." He said it the way people talk to dogs who are too close to the road. I could catalog the small moments when the picture shifted. The winter my mother stopped singing while she folded laundry. The spring my father gave me a bicycle and then banned me from the street because Birch Lane is too busy, even though no one ever drove down it unless they meant to. The summer our neighbor Mrs. Dalrymple asked if I wanted to come to the pool and my mother answered for me, "Mila has reading to do." Later, she pressed a book into my hands like a shield. But the moment that calcified into bone came when I was 14. It was late, later than my curfew, which never changed even when I got taller. I had been at the library tutoring a freshman in algebra. The house smelled like lemon polish and heat. Voices seeped under the study door, not loud but urgent. The kind of urgent that makes you step softer without thinking. I paused in the hallway, leaned against the wall where the paint was smooth from hands. My mother again, that thin thread of sound. This can't keep going. This isn't fair to her. My father, we've come this far. There's nothing to gain from unspooling it now. A chair leg scraped. Papers shifted. Then, very clearly, a sentence that landed like a nail. You promised me, Elena, we'd make sure she never knew. Knew what? The question sat in my mouth like a coin. On my way up the stairs, I knocked my elbow against the cherry cabinet. Something rattled inside. I pressed my ear to the wood and heard the faintest tap, like a marble rolling to a stop. For weeks after, whenever I passed, I imagined the sound. I imagined opening the door and finding the thing that finally told the truth. I imagined not being brave enough to touch it. At 19, I can measure my life in two kinds of time: the minutes I've spent pretending I didn't hear, and the minutes I've spent learning how to listen. The summer after graduation, when everyone else scattered like birds, some to dorms, some to jobs, some to anywhere but here, I stayed. Dad said the gap year would look industrious if I worked at his office. Mom said the house would be quiet without me. Neither asked what I wanted, but my wanting had become a small, well-fed animal that slept with one eye open. The morning everything began to shift for real, the air tasted like impending rain. I had been up too late, scrolling through job boards and campus housing I couldn't afford without a scholarship I didn't apply for because my father said, "We'll revisit," in the tone that means never. I went downstairs to make coffee. The cherry cabinet's shadow cut the hallway in half. I stood in it and counted my breaths. When the kettle clicked off, I heard it, a soft thud at the front door. The kind of sound envelopes make when they've been pushed through the slot too fast. I found it on the mat, brown paper. No return address, my name in handwriting that wasn't either of my parents. Just Mila, no last name, as if the writer knew the last name might be wrong. I carried it to the kitchen like it might bruise. I didn't open it right away. I made my coffee, stirring until the swirl in the mug closed over on itself. My hands were steady the way hands get when your heart refuses to be. I slid a butter knife under the flap. Inside, not papers, not a letter, but a small music box wrapped in tissue, the kind sold to tourists on weekends. Maple wood, simple, a tiny brass key tied to it with thread. On the underside, a sticker with a worn stamp, Starling Antiques. I twisted the crank once, twice. A melody uncoiled, thin and nostalgic, something like Edelweiss, but not familiar in that way memories are familiar only because you want them to be. My mother came into the kitchen as the last notes faded. She stopped when she saw the box. The pause was microscopic and enormous. "Where did you get that?" she asked. Her voice was careful velvet. "It came through the door," I said. I lifted the little brass key tied to it. "There's this, too." She glanced toward the hallway, the study door at the end like a closed eye, the cherry cabinet halfway down like a question. "Put it away," she said. "You know how your father is about clutter." She poured herself water she wouldn't drink and left without touching me or the box. I watched the back of her neck move as she swallowed the rest of her sentence. When she was gone, I untied the thread. The key slid into my palm, cold enough to startle. It wasn't the right shape for the music box. The crank already belonged to the song. This key was longer, older, its teeth filed into a notch I recognized because I had seen its twin live on my father's ring every day of my life. I went to the hallway and knelt by the cherry cabinet. The gloss reflected a bent version of my face. I fitted the key into the bottom lock. It didn't slide in all the way, but it kissed the metal like it wanted to. I turned it a fraction. Click. Not open, not yet, just the sound of possibility unlatching something inside my chest. From behind the study door came the murmur of my father's voice. Another call, another close conversation. The music box in my pocket ticked once as the spring settled, a tiny mechanical heartbeat. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard answered. I pressed my palm flat to the cabinet, felt the cool wood, and beneath it, the shape of a truth I'd been circling since the night I learned a sentence could be a blade. I wasn't brave enough at 5. I wasn't brave enough at 14. At 19, Bravery felt less like a leap and more like pressure applied in one steady direction. The kettle on the stove pinged as it cooled. The house breathed. My pulse counted to 10, and then to 10 again. I took my hand away from the lock and stood up. Not because I was finished. Because I finally understood that if a door had stayed closed this long, it would not open if I marched. It would open if I listened. That night, when the house went dark and the wind began to lift the leaves on Birch Lane, I wound the music box once and set it gently on the floor by my bedroom door. I lay down fully clothed, the key tucked under my pillow, the brass warming to me. The melody unwound like a thread you could follow in the dark. People like to tell children their blessings. Maybe I was. Maybe I was a ledger entry. Maybe I was both. But when the lullaby finished and the last note held on a fraction too long, I knew this. I hadn't committed any sin by being born. If there was a sin in our house, it belonged to the people who hid the key. The next morning, I would go to Starling Antiques. I would follow the handwriting that had known my name without the weight of Hartwell tied to it. I would stand in front of the cabinet again with the key and decide whether to turn it. And if I heard another whisper through another door, make sure she never knew I would answer it. With the sound of a lock finally opening, the night after my discovery felt endless. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my tiny room, the shadows on the walls stretching into monsters. My mind wouldn't rest. It kept circling back to the photograph, the girl, and the message scrawled on the back. You were never supposed to know. Those words were like a curse. Who wrote them? And why did they want to keep me in the dark? The next morning, I decided I couldn't live with half-truths anymore. If my mother had kept secrets, then the answers had to be in this house, the house I had once called home but now felt like a stranger's cage. I waited until the house was quiet. Mom was in the kitchen humming as she prepared breakfast, and the silence between us was heavier than ever. I couldn't look her in the eyes without imagining her lying to me for years. After nibbling at my food, I excused myself and slipped upstairs. Her bedroom was always off limits when I was younger. A mother needs her privacy, Mila, she used to say with a gentle but firm smile. Now I realized it wasn't privacy, it was protection. From what? I was about to find out. The door creaked open, betraying my presence, but no footsteps followed. I let out a breath and began searching. Drawers, closets, even beneath the mattress. Nothing but ordinary things. A few worn dresses, photographs of family holidays, yellowing letters addressed to no one I recognized. Then, under a loose floorboard near her vanity, I found it. A small box, wrapped in faded blue cloth. My hands shook as I lifted it out. Inside were items that didn't make sense together. An old bracelet with strange engravings, a lock of hair tied with a ribbon, and a stack of letters bound tightly with string. The first letter began with words that nearly stopped my heart. To the one who will never forgive me. It was written in my mother's handwriting. I read feverishly, each line cutting deeper than the last. She confessed things I couldn't comprehend, about a man she once loved, about betrayal, and about a child. A child who wasn't supposed to survive. A child who was me. She wrote of choices she had made to keep me safe, choices that had destroyed lives. And then came the part that made me shiver. If she ever discovers the truth, they will come for her. Protect her at all costs. I dropped the letter, my pulse racing. Who were they? And why would they want me? Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. My mother stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes not of anger but of fear. Mila, she whispered, her voice trembling, you weren't supposed to see that. Not yet. I clutched the box to my chest. What does this mean, Mum? Who are they? And what have you been hiding from me? Her lips trembled as if she wanted to speak, but then she shook her head violently. Not now. Please, Mila. If you knew the whole truth, it would break you. But it was already too late. The truth wasn't waiting for me anymore. I was chasing it. And I wasn't going to stop that I couldn't sleep that night. My mother's words echoed in my head like a curse. If you knew the whole truth, it would break you. But how could not knowing be any less painful? The box of secrets now sat hidden beneath my bed, but its weight pressed against my chest every second. Every sound in the house made me jump. The creak of the floorboards, the whistle of the wind through the cracks of the old windows. It was as if the walls themselves knew the truth I didn't. By the third night, something happened. I woke to a faint tapping at my window. At first, I thought it was a tree branch, but when I sat up, I saw the outline of a figure, tall, unmoving, standing just beyond the glass. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't scream. My body refused to move. The figure didn't try to come in. It simply stood there, watching. And then, after what felt like forever, it raised a hand and tapped the glass once more, slow, deliberate, and disappeared into the darkness. I scrambled to the window and pulled back the curtain, but there was nothing. No footprints in the damp earth. No sign anyone had been there at all. Still, I knew I hadn't imagined it. The next morning, I confronted my mother. "Someone was here last night, outside my window." "Who are they, Mom?" "The ones you wrote about." Her face drained of color. She dropped the teacup she was holding, the porcelain shattering against the floor. She didn't even look down. Her eyes locked onto mine with a desperation I had never seen before. "Mila, you have to listen to me. If someone is watching, it means they know you've started searching. They must never find out what's inside that box." "Too late," I said bitterly. "I already read the letters." Her hands shook as she grabbed my shoulders. "Then you've put yourself in danger I can't protect you from. You don't understand who these people are. They're not just strangers, they're part of your bloodline." I froze. "My bloodline?" She nodded, her lips trembling. "The man in those letters, he wasn't just someone I loved. He was part of a family bound to secrets so dark that people have killed to protect them. And you, Mila, you're the living proof of what was never supposed to exist." I stumbled back, my knees weak. Never supposed to exist? The words cut into me like knives. Before I could ask more, there was a knock at the front door. A sharp, heavy knock that made both of us jump. My mother pressed a finger to her lips, signaling me to stay quiet. She moved to the door, hesitated, then opened it just a crack. A man's voice drifted through, calm, polite, but laced with something cold. "We're looking for Mila. Is she home?" My blood turned to ice. Mom stiffened, her hand tightening on the door. "No, you have the wrong house." But I knew then, whoever they were, they had already found me. The sound of my mother's voice, trembling yet firm, still rings in my ears. "No, you have the wrong house." But the man didn't leave. Through the narrow crack of the door, I could see him, tall, broad shoulders, dressed in a long black coat that seemed out of place for the season. His eyes were sharp, piercing, and though his lips curved into a polite smile, it felt like a mask stretched too thin. "I think you'll find I rarely have the wrong house," he replied smoothly. Then, with a subtle shift, he leaned closer to the doorframe and lowered his voice. "Mila looks a lot like him, doesn't she?" The blood drained from my face. He knew. My mother slammed the door shut with such force the walls shook. She pressed her back against it, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Her hands trembled as if she was holding back the urge to scream. "Mom," I whispered, my voice cracking. "Who was that man? How does he know my name?" She closed her eyes for a moment before answering. "Because he was one of them. One of the people who swore no child of your father's would ever live to tell the story." I staggered back, my stomach twisting. "You're saying they want to kill me?" Her silence was louder than any answer. That night, fear swallowed me whole. But fear has a way of turning into something else, into hunger for the truth. I couldn't just sit and wait to be hunted. I had to know what I was running from. So, after my mother had gone to bed, I pulled the box from beneath mine once again. My hands shook as I sifted through the letters, looking for something I had missed. And then I found it. A folded map, yellowed with age, marked with an X. At first, I thought it was nothing more than a sketch, but when I held it up to the light, I saw faint words written across it, words that made my skin crawl. "The inheritance lies buried where the first betrayal began." Inheritance. Betrayal. It sounded like something out of a riddle, but deep down, I knew it was connected to my father. The next day, I confronted my mother again, the map clenched in my fist. "What is this? What inheritance? What betrayal?" She looked at the map, and her face crumbled. "I should have burned it years ago." "Tell me," I demanded. Her voice was hoarse when she finally spoke. "Your father belonged to a family whose wealth wasn't earned, it was taken. Stolen. And what they couldn't steal, they destroyed. He tried to walk away, Mila. He tried to protect us. But leaving them meant making enemies that don't forgive. That map, it leads to what he died trying to hide. My pulse quickened. Hide from them. Yes, she whispered. And if they find it before you do, they won't just destroy what's left of him, they'll destroy you too. Before I could respond, we both froze at the sound of gravel crunching outside. Car doors slammed shut. More than one. Through the window, I saw them, 3 men in dark coats, moving toward the house with the same cold precision as the man from last night. Mom gripped my arm. They've come back. But my eyes were fixed on the map. For the first time, I felt it deep in my bones. This wasn't just about running anymore. This was about finishing what my father started. And I would, even if it killed me. The pounding on the door was like thunder against my chest. Mila, my mother whispered urgently, her nails digging into my arm, we need to leave now. But my eyes were locked on the map. If I left it behind, I'd never forgive myself. My father had given his life for the secret, and now it was staring back at me in faded ink and trembling lines. I shoved the map into my backpack just as the door rattled violently. Open up! A man's voice barked from outside. This time it wasn't polite. Mom grabbed her car keys. Through the back. Hurry! We slipped out into the night, the cold air burning my lungs as we ran. The headlights of their black cars glared like predator eyes behind us. My mother's hands shook as she fumbled with the car lock, but somehow we made it inside before they spotted us. The tires screeched against gravel as we sped away, hearts pounding in unison. For several minutes, all I could hear was the roar of the engine and my mother's sharp breaths. Finally, I found my voice. Where does the map lead? Her hands tightened around the wheel. An old warehouse on the edge of town. That's where your father went the night he never came home. A chill spread through me. The warehouse. The place of his last betrayal. I unfolded the map again under the dim glow of the dashboard light. Scribbled across the bottom, almost invisible unless tilted at an angle, was another line of text. The truth waits beneath the floor where no light reaches. I swallowed hard. It's not just a warehouse, is it? Something's hidden there. My mother's silence was answer enough. By dawn, we reached the outskirts of town. The warehouse stood like a skeleton against the rising sun, abandoned, rusted, yet somehow alive with the weight of secrets buried inside. Mom wanted to stay in the car, but I couldn't. My feet carried me forward, each step echoing against broken glass and silence. Inside, the air smelled of rust, dust, and something older, something hidden. And then I saw it, a section of the floor, darker than the rest, the boards uneven as though they had been tampered with. My heart raced as I knelt down, pressing my ear to the wood. Faintly, I heard it hollow. I pried the boards loose with a rusted iron bar, and beneath them lay a small, weathered chest, its lock corroded with age. When I forced it open, I expected money, maybe documents, maybe even jewels. But instead, I found something far heavier. A leather-bound journal. My father's handwriting on the cover. The first page read, "If you are reading this, it means they've already tried to erase me. But the truth cannot be buried. Mila, they will come for you. And when they do, you must decide, will you hide, or will you finish what I started?" My blood ran cold. He had written it for me. I barely had time to turn the page when I heard footsteps echoing inside the warehouse. Not my mother's. Deeper. Heavier. They had found us. The footsteps drew closer, each one a hammer striking the hollow silence of the warehouse. I clutched the journal to my chest, my pulse racing like it might shatter my ribs. My mother's voice echoed faintly from outside, calling my name, but I couldn't move. Not yet. Not until I understood. The journal felt alive in my hands. My father's voice seemed to rise from its pages as I flipped through hastily scribbled notes, names crossed out, and maps redrawn. The same phrase kept appearing over and over again. Trust no one, not even those closest to you. A shadow stretched across the cracked floorboards. I looked up. The man who stepped into view wore a black coat, his presence as suffocating as the silence before a storm. His face was partly hidden, but his voice was unmistakable. "Give me the journal, Mila." It was Mr. Cross, my boss, the same man who had praised me for my loyalty, the same man who had given me extra hours when I needed the money, The same man who had smiled at me like I was more than just another employee. My throat tightened. You knew my father? His smirk answered me before his words did. Knew him? Mila, I made him. Everything he built, every step he took, I allowed it. Until he betrayed me. My stomach dropped. The betrayal wasn't my father's doing at all. It was his. Cross stepped closer, his boots grinding against broken glass. Your father was weak. He thought he could outsmart me. That journal, it's worthless in your hands. But in mine, his eyes gleamed. It finishes what he started. I clutched the journal tighter. He didn't trust you. That's why he left this for me. Cross chuckled darkly. No, Mila. He didn't trust anyone. Not even your mother. The words struck like a blade. My mother. No. She had been protecting me, hadn't she? As if summoned by my thoughts, she appeared at the warehouse entrance, her face pale, her eyes glistening with something I couldn't name. Fear, guilt, regret. Mila, she whispered, stepping closer. Give him the journal. My heart stopped. What? Her voice cracked. It's the only way to keep you alive. Please. The world tilted. My father's warning screamed in my ears. Trust no one. Not even those closest to you. I stumbled back, the journal trembling in my grip. You knew all along. Tears slid down her cheeks. I tried to protect you. But your father, he dragged us into this mess. If you don't give Cross the journal, they'll kill us both. Cross's smile widened, like a predator watching its prey. In that moment, I understood. My father hadn't just left me a journal. He had left me a choice. I could hand it over and survive, shackled by their lies. Or I could run, take the truth, and become the very threat they feared. The warehouse seemed to hold its breath as my fingers brushed the leather cover one last time. My father's words whispered in my soul. The truth cannot be buried. I looked up, fire surging in my chest. No, I said. You won't bury me too. Before Cross could react, I darted toward the shattered windows, glass biting at my skin as I hurled myself into the dawn. The journal was pressed against me like a heartbeat. Behind me, their shouts echoed, furious and desperate. But ahead was freedom. Ahead was the truth. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid.